What happens when AI can do your job just as well as you can? My guest today is Mickey Fitch-Collins, and we ended up having a really interesting conversation about the future of work, what humans are actually uniquely good at, and maybe most interestingly, what we would do with our lives if work no longer took up so much of them. Welcome to How to Be a Person, a podcast about life with me, your host, Giuliano Grimaudo. Mickey, thanks so much for joining me today. How's it going?
It's going awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Let's jump right in. Let's talk. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. As you nailed it, my name's Mickey Fitch-Collins, and what's the best way to describe myself? If I could do one thing for the rest of my life, it would be bass fishing. But what I do for work is my job is to help other people get better at their jobs, and so people always ask that question, what do you do? And of course, what we're asking is, what is your job?
Mm-hmm.
But what I do is I'm a mom, I'm a partner, I'm a bass fisherman, I'm a reader, I'm a cook, all sorts of things. I live in northern Wisconsin, but the work that I do is I work for a wonderful organization called Learnit, which is based out of California. Like I said, I tell people my job is to help other people get better at their jobs. I have a very interesting title, which is Human Skills Facilitator, which is very vague and kind of sounds a little woo-woo. But I'm embedded into dozens of different organizations, and I go in and I help employees kind of get better at their jobs, kind of building all the human skills that are really helpful and important to us these days. And because we believe that companies grow when their people do. So that's a little bit about me.
Interesting. No, I love what you said. I was thinking about that recently, where people always ask what you do. And I have been the type of person who not only has had a bunch of different jobs in the past, but also has tried a bunch of different, of my own ventures and things like that. And I also always have 3 or 4 different things going on at a time.
Yep.
And so when people ask, what do you do? It's just I'm always I do a lot of different things. What do you do?
Yeah, depends on the day. Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Because I literally I can't put myself into just one category of this is what I do. Because I literally just do so many things,
Yeah. Well, and I think that's good. I mean, there's that adage of putting all your eggs in one basket, and that sometimes it can be a good thing, but a lot of times that's a really risky maneuver, right? And I think human beings, we're meant to be multifaceted and multi-interested. If I know people, and I'm sure you do too, that are all in on work all the time, and that's all they think about. That's all they do. And, it's well, what about the rest of your life? What do you mean the rest of my life? I sleep, I eat. And I'm well, no. In the times when you're not working and not sleeping, what are you doing? Well, I don't really know, and I'm oh my gosh, I have a list a mile long of the other things that, and I don't know if I would call it a balanced life, but it certainly is a full life.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if this is a good strategy or not, but I got to a point where I just deleted my entire bio on Instagram because I would constantly be changing it and adding stuff and tweaking it. And then at a certain point I was you know what? I don't even care. Just if you see something you hit the follow button. If not, don't hit follow. I don't care anymore.
Right on.
Because it's I don't know. I agree with you. I think life, this is one of the things I've said for a really long time. Actually, this was what was in my Instagram bio for a long time, was that life is meant to be lived. And first of all, let me say, I love working. I feel when I do stuff when I'm working on things that I'm passionate about, it can take up a lot of my time, and I have no problem with it because I love it,
Yeah.
But I think most people, and maybe that's just something that I'm projecting, but my assumption is that most people don't like what they do. That's kind of the vibe that I get from people. Yeah. I think you can find things that you like about what you do. And I think there's a good amount of people that do enjoy what they do. But I would say if you had to say, I say majority is in at least 51%. I'm hedging my bets. Okay. So at least 51%, I think, would say that they don't like what they do. And I think because of that, it becomes this thing where you're trying to balance all of the other stuff with your work, as opposed to just hey, my work is part of who I am as a person because it's something I'm passionate about and I love it. And it does take up a lot of my time, but there's also a bunch of other parts of my life that make up who I am as well,
Yeah. I was just doing a workshop. I was out in Ohio last week doing a workshop in person with some folks. And one of the things that I said that, I just kind of want to puke when people say work-life balance, right? Because when you think of the word balance, right, you kind of think of the scales of justice. You kind of have this idea that things are evenly, weighed out. And, I don't care if you're 20 or 40, 60, 80, you have kids, you don't, whatever you're doing, like there's very rarely moments where things are sitting in this like perfectly balanced sort of state. And it's exactly as what you just said is, to me, the phrase is work life integration.
Yeah.
And especially for any of us that, work remotely or we're on the go, we're traveling, whatever that is, everything slides into everything else, right? Like this idea, this aged concept of like, oh, you leave your personal life at the door when you come to work, like, but you don't. Like, we literally can't do that in our brains. Like, research tells us now that like we can't compartmentalize in that sort of way. Can we set some things aside? For sure. But as we were just talking, before you hit the record button, we were talking about our kids being on other walls of the house and stuff as we're sitting here, and I wouldn't want it any other way. In fact, like my wife and I have structured our life to be this way, to have this work-life integration.
Yeah, it's so funny because when you mentioned work-life balance, the phrase that popped into my head was work-life integration, like literally exactly what you said, because that's awesome. What I've said for so long, because to me, it really is about like integrating the two, because I think this is what's kind of funny is I feel like when COVID happened, first of all, for me, my wife and I were in a business at the time that like really thrived during COVID. So like, it was not bad for us at all, right? Like it was great.
Yeah.
But overall, right, there were a lot of parts of what happened that was just really bad. And like for a lot of people, it sucked and all those things. But what I will say is that I think that everything that happened that year kind of turned a lot of like systems on their head, where everyone thought everything had to be a certain way. And there was like a big enough wrench thrown into everything that like we just realized, oh, wait a second, nothing has to be the way it is anymore. Like we can do what we want, and like the way that we work is one of those things. Like I think most people, when COVID happened, like that was like their work changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think and I appreciate you sharing what you did, because I think that there's some folks that feel weird or feel guilty sometimes saying like, here's this really good thing that happened during COVID, right? Like, I think that there's, because somehow in there's this thought or this idea that like everything should have been bad or everything was bad. And the truth is that, there were businesses, there were people, there were couples, there were families that thrived during that because of what was required of us to do, right? And one of those things, is this whole reconceptualization of what is work, where is work, when is work, right? And I mean, one of my very good friends, he and I talk all the time about like this idea of no longer, I mean, and I realize I'm speaking from a place of privilege because of the type of work that I do, but like we no longer have to be held hostage to a specific address in a specific building and be held hostage for 8 hours or 9 hours of a workday of like, this is where you work and this is when you work. And it doesn't matter if you're doing work while you're at work, this is when and where you do it. Whereas, for the rest of us, and again, I mean, I get that this certainly does not apply to all people, but, for myself, I think about it and I'm like, I'm probably never going to work in an office environment again. And I'm going to do that intentionally because of the way that I have crafted my life, the way that my wife has crafted her life, the way that we've crafted our life around our kids and where we live geographically and all this sort of stuff. And that came out of this kind of world that opened up in a lot of ways as the world was closing down or shutting down, a whole nother world opened up. And I think a lot of that was mindset and opportunity and many, many businesses realizing, you know what, Learnit as well, the company that I work for, San Francisco based company. I live in northern Wisconsin, right? Up until right around pandemic time, right? They did everything in person. Everybody was based in the Bay Area, all of that sort of stuff. And then they said, well, hang on a second here. Let's change this because we could have a much greater reach. We could have a much greater, group of people that are part of this team. And I am obviously a beneficiary of that. But, I think like so many people, it's like, just because I live somewhere or because I choose to live somewhere, or sometimes we don't get to choose where we live, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to contribute to the world in a different place.
Totally. Well, and I think as well that like I definitely very much value in-person interactions, and even being in the same room as someone I'm working with. Like I've done both, and I see the value in it. But I also feel like if you can get your job done while also having the lifestyle that you want to have, like why would that not be like the top priority? You know what I mean? And I think like, working remotely and like building your life and your work into each other, kind of like what you were just saying, right? How it's like your kids are running around upstairs, my son's napping behind us. It's like, I want my life to look the way I want it to look. And there's never been a time in history where it has been as easy as it is now to actually do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what you said before about, I think the majority of people are unhappy with work, and I think, there's a commentary in there, I think, about what we see on social media, right? Of polarizing, right? People who are like, I love this work and this is the best thing ever and and then other people, this everything sucks and this is awful and blah. I mean, it's kind of I always call it plumber syndrome, right? You don't ever call the plumber to say like, hey, I just wanted to call you. It's Monday morning and I just wanted to let you know my toilets are flushing correctly and the water's cold and, everything's, going as it should, right? No, like nobody does that. If somebody's out there listening and you just like randomly call your plumber to say like, hey, everything's good on you, right? But what do? We call the plumber when like the toilet's backfiring and when things are leaking all over the place. And I think it's the same sort of way in which we talk about work, especially in social media, public forums, is very few of us go into that space to talk about work in like this net neutral sort of like, yeah, work is a thing. I'm here, right? We go to either say, this is this amazing thing that's going on, or here's this horribly problematic thing that's going on. And I do think a lot of people are, especially these days, I would say over the last couple of years, I think a growing, and the research supports this, like a growing negative sentiment around work, right? That people, the research that's out there that says, people want mattering and belonging feel more and more and more important at work, but the level of trust that exists out there, there's something called the Edelman Trust Barometer. That level of trust between employee and employer is actually going lower and lower and lower over time. So yeah, I mean, are people super upset? Absolutely. Is it scary though to say, as you and I have just been talking, I can craft my life, I can design some of these elements? Like, is there an element of privilege to that? 100%. Is there a huge element of risk of like, what does that look like? What if, I mean, for some people, like I have a couple of good friends that are like, I love the idea of working remotely or traveling, regularly for work. But as it turns out, I can't actually get anything done at work. And as it turns out, I hate traveling and it's horrible for my health or whatever, So like, I love the idea of this new sort of lifestyle, but I just can't do it.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Well, and it's funny. I was thinking when you were mentioning privilege, I feel like if you don't use the privilege that you have, then like, what's the point of having a privilege? Like, is it a privilege if you're not utilizing it, right? Like you're saying, I'm in a position to be able to design my life. Well, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to not do it just because I have the privilege or because other people don't, right? Like, I think like in my mind, I think about how there are, right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's like still like random, like uncontacted tribes and like some, places or whatever. It's like, okay, so does that mean I'm going to go without air conditioning because there are people that exist that, they just live in, indigenously or whatever? It's like, no, of course not. Right. And like, that's always been the case. And, in human history, right? That there's going to be some people who have access to more resources or more options or something like that. And there's other people that don't. And of course, right? Like if I'm going to do things to help those people as well, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to take advantage of those opportunities that are in front of me. And so like, I do think like more people need to realize that like, there has never been a better time to craft your life the way you want it to look like than now. Yeah.
I think the other side of it too, as I think about that, because I think the words craft and design come with a certain sense of privilege, a certain sense of, I don't know, some people might hear like a little bit of haughtiness there or whatever. Right. But I think it's also like when you sit down to really think about crafting or designing, you have to have an idea of what you want and what you value and what's important. And knowing those things, I think for some people that becomes very challenging, right? Because then what we have to do is we have to be willing to look in the mirror and say, what's important, what's valuable, what's not important, what's not valuable, what do I want, what do I not want? And again, those are very like black and white, this way, that way, sort of dichotomous sort of questions. But in order to design and craft something, that means you are either crafting towards and designing towards, or you're designing away from. And if you've been in an environment, or you've been in an industry or types of roles that is designed for you. And what I'm thinking about is things like manufacturing roles, operations roles, where it's like, you come to this place, this is the environment, these are the machines that you use in these types of ways, and these are the standard operating procedures and all this sort of stuff. To ask somebody, what type of work environment do you really thrive in? The ones that I work in, I think I've been thriving because I've
do. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think sometimes, and I find this sometimes in the workshops that I facilitate, when I ask folks is, like, what types of environments really help you concentrate, or like what types of environments really emulate the charging of the battery that we do with our phone. Right. And sometimes people look back at me like, this is the first time I've ever been asked those questions. And they're great questions to ask, but they're also questions of vulnerability, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know. So if I'm going to craft my life, what does that look like? And does that look like some, like an influencer on Instagram's craft of life, or, a YouTuber or something like that? Or does that just look like, for me, I live in the middle of the woods in northern Wisconsin, and, I, can do cool things in the outdoors with my family. And I don't have, I have a 12, or 13 step commute from my office to the rest of my life. Right.
Yeah.
But that crafting takes a while to figure that out. That design means you have to know some semblance of what you want the outcome or the goal to look like.
If you're enjoying the show and want to support, go to howtobeaperson.co and click support the show. The more support the show gets, the more episodes can be produced. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I feel like obviously there is like a certain privilege that exists in being able to craft the life that you want. But like, even how you were saying, like when you were doing these workshops and you ask people and they're like, I don't know, I haven't really thought about that. I didn't realize that was an option. Like, I do think that a lot of what can be labeled as like, oh, you're just in a privileged position to do it, is really someone taking responsibility for their outcomes and their mindset and their perspective, and like exposing themselves to what else is possible and all those things. And I'm not saying that that makes that person better in any way than the other people, but the idea is that like, oh, wait a minute, maybe they just didn't realize this was an option. Maybe you didn't realize what was possible. And I think that's part of it, is like making sure that people know that it is possible, and like to start thinking about those things of like, what actually, that's kind of a good point, right? Like, I just come to work and do what they tell me to do. I haven't really thought about in what environment would help me to concentrate better, or what environment would help me feel more recharged. Like, I didn't think about that,
Yeah. Well, and even, when I talk to people about the, again, we all have, these phones and stuff that, having just spent long hours in airports over this last week, people get crazy about finding an outlet to charge their phone, right? I mean, they just like cannot stand it if they can't find an outlet to charge their phone, right? And it's always, number one, it's funny to me because like, I'm just one of those, like the moment I step over to the threshold in an airport, like I'm like, nah, I've given up all sense of control, right? Because you just have to, but that's that, like being a frequent traveler person. But I think about that, and I'm sure you've heard this comparison before of like, we're so focused on finding somewhere that we can plug our phones in to make sure that our phone battery is charged. But like, how well do we actually think about how are we charging our own battery? Or more importantly, and maybe it's more importantly for some, maybe it's less important for some, but like, do you actually understand what's discharging your battery? And I don't mean your phone battery. I mean you as a human, right?
Yeah.
And I share that because like, I went through a process, like I'm in my second career now. And I went through the process of struggling with my first career and making the decision. Nobody made the decision for me. I made the decision to walk away from a career that I had 2 advanced degrees in, and I was in a C-suite level position and all this sort of stuff, because it no longer fit with what I wanted my life to be like, right? And I was literally looking in the mirror and was like, what is going on with me physically? My levels of stress, emotions, but also just the like kind of I and my work had become a shell of what it used to be, like the things that used to charge my batteries. I was no longer doing any of those things, right? And I think sometimes we get, our carriages get stuck in the ruts of the road, right? That's what that is, right? Ruts of the road. And we have to have the willingness sometimes to say, is this actually still charging my batteries? And it's okay if it's not charging your batteries anymore.
Yeah.
But if it's discharging your batteries, again, you think about your phone. You have that app that's running in the background that like you realize like 3 hours into your day that your phone's at like 15% battery. We will go to the ends of the earth to figure out what's causing that discharge on our phone. Why are we not willing to do that for ourselves? Or when we do, it's only in a crisis, sort of situation. And I always share that with folks because I'm like, listen, like I walked away from a career, not without a huge element of struggle. But what I did was very simply this analysis of what's charging and discharging, and of the what's charging, what are those things? Like, what are those actions? What are those behaviors? What are those outcomes? What are those experiences? Who am I interacting with? What types of things? And then what I did was I took that and I just completely turned it around. I said, okay, well, in what job or in what industry could I do all of that charging stuff all the time? Right. And that's how I landed myself in my second career now.
Yeah. I wonder if part of the lack of awareness around it comes from like what we were talking about before, this idea of work-life balance, where work is like this separate part of your life somehow, that like, you're just like, well, it's just supposed to suck and it's supposed to be hard and I'm supposed to not like it. So what is it? What would charging my battery, discharging, who cares? Like, I wonder if that's kind of where it comes from,
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think there's, number one, I think there's a generational component to this. I think these types of conversations really are really present, I think, just in kind of the millennial and younger, like the millennial and Gen Z. Maybe a few of the Xers are starting to have those conversations, but I think a lot of Xers are starting to look at the finish line. And so they're less willing to say like, oh, I'm going to make any changes because, they're 10 to 15 years or less out from making the, finishing up career. So I think there's a generational component to it. And I think there's a generational component to the recognition that very few jobs are I'm going to work it for 35 years and I get my gold watch at the end, right? Like I know very, very few people. I mean, I'm saying less than a handful.
Yeah.
That, and I'm in my mid 40s. I know less than a handful of people that work at the same organization that they started out right after college at. Yeah. It's just not a reality anymore. And so I think
that's got to be so insanely uncommon. I can't even think of one person.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a generational component to this type of conversation and this idea of like fluidity. I think there's also research tells us, right, that people have like 2 to 3 major careers in their working lifespans. And that's new. That's different in the last like 20, 30 years. Probably will become I would imagine will become like 3 to 5 over the Gen Z, as they continue to move through the career. But I think it's also, I mean, I think that the pandemic, I think the combination of the pandemic and technology, right, I think has given people at least access to a type of freedom. Whether or not we actually utilize that freedom is a different thing, but I think it's given people access to thinking about a type of freedom that can allow for some of this crafting or can allow for some of this integration. And again, the problem with that is that there are some like you, like me, that can do that. And then there's other folks that are like, listen, I'm on, an assembly line making widgets. Cool. Thank you for making the widgets. Listen, I work in a farm and I can't work from home when I run a farm, or whatever that is. Right. Yeah. So there are essential jobs, I work at a hospital. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we can't integrate work and life more. And that it's just like, oh yeah, this thing that has to suck for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
12 hours of your day, you have something that sucks. I mean, I think cumulatively, I'd like to think that I only think about 2 hours of my day sucks, right? But maybe less than that. I don't know if there's a goal associated with that.
Yeah, you're like, I'm trying to minimize as much sucking as possible.
Yeah. Maximize the integration, minimize the suck. Yeah. There's the bumper sticker.
I think it requires us to expand our minds and like what we believe is possible. Cause I agree with you, right? Like when you're describing like, hey, there's certain things that like, dude, it just is what it is, right? Like that job is not changing. But I think too, that like, there's like, what it made me think of was when you mentioned like working in the hospital. I feel like I'd seen stuff on social media recently where someone was talking about how they like the shifts are just like unreasonably long. Like there's something like 14 hours or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you can't possibly be functioning at your best and helping people for 14 hours. Like that's not possible to do it. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just literally not possible. And so you know that like patients aren't getting the care that they need and the employees are clearly suffering. You're like, so why is it still like that? Like, why is someone not stepped in and been like, we're going to just do this differently here. Okay. Yeah. You get 6-hour shifts because that's the max you can go. And, but my point is just that I think that, part of what keeps things stuck the way they are is people believing that things have to be that way, And I think if the more people do like pioneer things forward, right? Like right now it's really easy for someone who let's say relatively easier for someone who works an office job to figure out a way to work remotely, right? Yeah. And to kind of design their life. But the more people that do that, I think then that has a ripple effect into other industries of people who like maybe their industry is way more rigid, but they go, yeah, but like, does it have to be this extreme? Like, can we adjust this? Can we adjust this? And I think, like I said, I think it's a matter of like believing that there is more possible and going for that integration, right? Not having it just be like, well, that's just how it is. Yeah. That's just how work is. But being like, no, if we had to design this job along with the business and how it's serving customers or patients or clients, right, in a way that everyone benefits, like how could we do it differently? And I think that the more people think that way, the more that we'll end up with those types of results,
Yeah. I mean, I think you bring up a good point of, again, the healthcare industry, I think, again, having just spent a lot of time in airports over the last few days, how long a flight crew is allowed to work for. I don't even know what the number is, 6 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is before they time out. Right. And then they can't work legally cannot work. Yeah. And I think that seems like, I mean, I know there's other industries, right? Like folks that like, transportation logistics for, like trucking or locomotives and, things like that. But I'm like, why? And maybe I'm just, I just don't know, right? Maybe we're just ignorant and we just don't know. Yeah, but, I have a family member who's a nurse, right? Yeah, 12-hour shifts. Well, it's 12 hours you're working and then whatever notes that you need to finish, based on what happened during that 12 hours. And so that person sometimes, works 14 or 15 hours, right? And then has a commute, has to go home, sleep, all this stuff, and then, come back and do it again. And I think about that and I think, if we're really worried about airplane pilots who always have a co-pilot, but if we're really worried about airplane pilots being able to work with safety as the first degree, right? Why are we less concerned about firefighters and doctors and nurses and other medical technicians and things of that sort? Like, aren't we also concerned about them having safety? Like, why do we have ER doctors that have like they've been on for 40 hours or something like that on call for half of it or firefighters, same thing. Oh, well, they get to sleep. And it's like, but like there's sleep and then there's restorative sleep, So it's baffling to me. And it's also, I think about it too. Again, I mean, I'm a research person, but I think about all of the research that is coming out about like the incredibly ill health effects that occur to people in these industries that have these long, gruesome, not sitting at a desk filling out paperwork and click like some of us might be. sort of roles. And what does that look like when you're 50, 55, 60, and I think about that of every time I've gone to, the emergency room or something like that, I think, man, I hope I'm getting this person at the beginning of their shift, or within the first couple of hours. Right.
So true.
And like, they start giving you any indicators. Like sometimes I'm like, I want to ask, are you at the beginning of their shift or are you at the end? Can I get somebody else?
Yeah,
like,
it's true. Yeah,
so
no, you're totally right. I think too, like, it is interesting also in like, we were talking about how like COVID changed things and things became remote, but now also, because you've mentioned it before, talking about like AI and how that is like making its way into like everything, it feels like. And it kind of makes you wonder like what like the future of work is actually going to look like when all of these tools, like not only they didn't even exist 5 years ago, but like now they're like literally like as good. They do your job just as good, if not better than you. And they're also building physical robots who can also do things just like you. So you're like, wow, like what is work even going to look like in a few years,
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a pop-up stand at an airport the other day that has it's a massage bed that you boop, 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 boop on the tablet. You input some, I kind of sat and watched people use it, inputting, I think, some like basic, height, weight, where's your pain, whatever. And you lay on this table and it's like robot arms and robot hands that like boo. And you're right in the middle of the airport. Like it's like a glass cube sort of, severance sort of thing. And I was thinking about that and people were using it constantly. And I went up and I looked at it and I was like, because it's way less expensive than going to one of those, spa places or whatever. I mean, it was like a half an hour massage was like $20 or something like that. Cause I'm like, yeah, all they're doing is paying electricity. They already have the technology to be, okay, like when somebody says they have pain in their shoulders, this is the program that the robot hands and the robot arms, and, they've told you if they want it really hard or light or whatever. So it's really inexpensive and absolutely serve the needs of these road weary travelers and stuff. And so, I think about stuff like that and I'm like, man, like that's not that I'm like, yeah, let's put all the masseuses out of work or anything like that. Like, that's not what I mean, but it's solving for, and this is what is really exciting to me about AI, is it's solving for a lot of, at least as I think about my personal life and my work life, it's solving for a lot of these lower level problems, tasks, issues, recurring, pain in the butt sort of things that one has to do. It's solving for those things, right? And you're kind of allowing, I feel like we made a switch as a company from one AI tool to another AI tool at the end of May. And for me, that has felt like a life upgrade in terms of my ability to solve for certain things and things to be in automation and just all this sort of stuff. And it's really actually significantly impacted the way in which I can make decisions and gather information and all this sort of, and just solve for bigger problems. And that's really exciting. But I think to me, people get really concerned in exactly what you said is like, well, what is work going to look like in a couple of years? And it's like, who the hell knows? Like, I mean, if you, when I made my career switch was, about 5.5 years ago, there's no way if somebody said, what is your life going to be like in 5 years? Who knows?
No clue.
Right. And this job that I have, I mean, like even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, this was in an office building in a computer lab with, I don't know, a chalkboard, maybe if we were feeling fancy, a dry erase board and somebody yammering at you, right? And now it's done entirely differently. And so what is work going to look like? Are there going to be some jobs that go away? Absolutely. Are there going to be other jobs that pop up that we have no way of conceptualizing? 100%, because a lot of us are working in those jobs that we had no way of conceptualizing 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. And
very true.
Are we going to be able to solve for a lot of that kind of low level sort of operational stuff that all businesses and organizations and people need to do? Yeah. So what does that mean? Then we get to solve the bigger problems, right?
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting to me. Like when I think about like, can we use AI to actually, and are we, and I know we are, but like, can we use AI to actually significantly impact some of the problems that are happening in the world. Yes. Is there a cost to that? Sure. Right. And I was just, again, in a state, big battleground for, data centers and people fighting the building of data centers and all that sort of stuff. Right. And I see both sides of that very, very clearly.
Yeah.
But I also think there's nobody who's going to say, hey, this is going to be, let's go back to being an internet free zone. We're not going to have any satellites that are allowed to go over this latitude and longitude. Like, it's just not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've been thinking about getting life insurance but keep putting it off, now's probably a good time to look into it. Go to howtobeaperson.co and click life insurance to get a quote now. It makes me think, because when you were talking about the masseuse thing at the airport, there was someone that my wife and I are friends with who is a massage therapist. And I always remember her. We haven't hung out in a long time. When we were hanging out with her more, I always remember her talking about how her joints hurt and how her feet hurt because she was on her feet all day and all this stuff. Yeah. And it is really interesting because, we have human beings who, remember when we started the conversation, we're like, what do you do? Like, they identify with like the physical thing that they do for work every day, right? Like, not this friend specifically, but like if someone's like, I'm a massage therapist, it's like, okay, so you stand over a table that someone's laying on and you like do this stuff with your hands, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's like we define ourselves, like our identities are tied to like what we physically do every day. Yeah. And I feel like this whole revolution of AI is kind of forcing people to like confront who they are as people and not just what they do. Because this was kind of like my thought process on it. It's kind of funny because I feel like I heard someone said something about how Elon Musk said something about AI and robots doing stuff and whatever, and how like the cost of everything would go down and whatever. I don't know if that's true or not, but my point about that was thinking like, just like you were saying with like the robot thing at the airport, there is such a small cost associated with it, right? Like whatever the cost was to build the machine, and then a tiny electricity cost ongoing. And it's super, right? Like they don't even they could probably charge $2 for a massage, right? And it would still be profitable. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration, but
the machine's making minimally $100 an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
20-minute massage is $20. Yeah. Or 30-minute. Yeah.
So it makes you think. You're like, I guess my point is that for a very long time, humans have been doing things that machines really should be doing, right? Like when you think about a person, if a person is doing, like I said, the massage therapy thing, it's like, oh, my joints, after all these years, it's like my joints are killing me. My feet are killing my back because I'm bending. You're like, you weren't designed to do that. You were not designed to stand over a table and do this thing over and over again for 8 hours a day for 20 years, right? Like it's not what we were designed to do. And so my point is that I actually think it's pretty interesting. And I think it's exciting to contemplate like where it's going to go, like what's going to happen, because I do believe that a lot of people's jobs, and not just physical jobs like that, like the massage therapy thing, like people who have high paying office jobs now will be replaced with AI. And even maybe not even high paying, but like if you just think about like entry level stuff, like that stuff can just very easily be done by AI now, like very, very easily. And so a lot of that stuff is just going to go away. And I understand the whole like, hey, like, well, we need money. What am I supposed to do? I need a job. Like, I get that. But, and this is what I was mentioning before, is that like, if everything that humans currently do, and that has to be funded because a human is doing it, you have to pay a human to do it. If everything that humans do, like physically and, like low paying office stuff, can be replaced by an AI or a robot doing that thing, and the cost drops significantly, we're talking at least 90% drop in cost. It's like, doesn't that then make the money that we do make like more valuable because the cost of everything is much lower? Like theoretically, the cost of everything should go down. But then also it means, what is your value as a person? Because this is the thing, like a lot of people, again, identify with what they do for work, which is okay. I get it. I do that too. But like, what happens when the thing you do for work is just no longer needed anymore. Like
Yeah.
you don't need to do it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like you just don't need to do it. It's someone else.
It is,
you know?
yeah. I mean, I think what's so challenging about this, as well as what's so exciting about this, is that there's an existential threat associated with it, right? I mean, it's exactly what you just said of people, you know, the what do you do is not like, tell me about the things that you're passionate about. It's tell me your job, right? And it's funny because you were saying is like, you know, people's job is the thing that they do physically. And I'm like, then I smash a keyboard all day. Like, I talk into a microphone. That's my job.
Smasher.
Right? That's the thing I physically do. Yeah. But I do think like, so then what becomes work, and what's, to me, what is exhilarating about that and exciting about that is those things that are uniquely human, which is relationships and empathy and problem solving and creativity and critical thinking and pardon me, being able to make decisions in ways and solve for problems in ways that machines can't necessarily do yet. And that's what gets me really excited, is because I think about like, well, if we're not having to do some of this more basic functional sort of stuff, does that not allow for us to be able to solve for the bigger things? Right? Like, does that not allow us to think about eradication of bigger diseases and, healthcare issues and poverty and, things that right now we want to give more time and energy to, but we're spending time filling out reports and doing audits of this and doing that, and so like that to me is what's really exciting is if my brain is less, if there's less value that I'm bringing to an organization because of my operational capabilities, then my value becomes my ability to be creative and be a good problem solver and be in relationship with people, making connections between different people to do that problem solving, that decision making. And that's incredibly exciting to me, because I think then we're actually going to be able to get some things done in a different sort of way, because we're not spending our time chasing our tail with paperwork and administrative and operational tasks. And again, I'm not trying to minimize that sort of stuff, but I think it's one of the main reasons why people say like, well, we didn't have time to get to that, or it's taking too much time. And well, what's taking the time? The stuff that I think that we ought to be looking very critically of using the infrastructures that AI is allowing us to do, to be able to outsource that stuff to AI, so that we're continuing to insource to human source, put human in the lead of making these really good decisions and building relationships and coalitions and partnerships. That to me is, gosh, I mean, it's hard to be like, oh, what's life going to be like 5 years from now? But I'm like, that's what I think is going to be really important. I think each one of us, at least for me, probably for the last 18 months, maybe 24 months, multiple times a week. And I do this because I am a quote unquote knowledge worker. I am a service provider. What I find myself thinking about on a regular basis is, what is the value that I contributed internally to my organization? What is the value that I contributed externally to my organization? What impact did I make today? Right? Like, what relationships did I build or enhance or, curate or let go of? Right? Because like, again, that's like the uniquely human stuff. That's not an automation. That's not a routine that I can build in Claude, right?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that is uniquely me, uniquely human. And I mean, that's what's really exciting for me in my work, is like, I help build those skills in people all the time. And we all have been spending skills for a long time, spending time building skills, learning Excel and how to do Power BI and how to, measure metrics and all this sort of stuff. Again, super important stuff, but maybe I don't need to be spending as much time doing that stuff as much as I need to be learning how to communicate with other humans and how to be in relationship with other humans.
Yeah. You know what it makes me think of? Like, I was trying to think, I'm like, what's a good comparison? And I feel like a good example is, I guess I don't really know how long ago this would be, 100 or 200 years ago, right? Like, if you needed water, you would have had to go like fetch water, right? Where you would have had to like have a bucket and go to the well and go get it, or go down to like some stream and get it and walk back. And you think about like the energy and like time cost associated with that. And now we all just have running water, right? You just flip the thing and the water comes out. And the cost of that is so insanely minimal. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, that's, I think, what it is. Like, that's, I think, a good comparison, because it's, no one thinks now about water. It's like, well, what am I going to do now that I don't have to go get water? You're like, I don't know, whatever you want. Right?
Yeah,
Like, no one's comparing and thinking, man, I have just so much free time now that I don't have to go collect water. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Because
it's like, we just adapt and we fill that time with other things, you know?
Right. Yeah. And, you know, again, for anybody who's literally listening to a podcast is living in some type of civilized world where, they're not having to go get their water. But, you know, I do think about something interesting, and I share this with people all the time, is where I live, we don't, like, literally at my house, we don't have data service. There is a data gap where I live. And so when we lose power, internet gone, data gone, right? I have no way to communicate out. I have to go down the road to the gas station, right? And again, I live in a pretty rural area, and I know this. But in those moments when that happens, there is this like flash of like, oh shit, like, what do we do now, right? Because it's also like, I can't communicate back to my colleagues of like, hey, I just lost power, right? And it's always funny to me because I'm like, you know, it's 2026. I work in an entirely remote job. I work for a company that is several thousand miles away. I work for customers and clients that are also thousands or tens of thousands, you know, other side of the world, whatever it is. And when the power goes out, I'm donezo, right? You know, and so this idea of I don't have to gather water anymore, and so I don't have to think about it. You know, I think the internet is the next, kind of the sooner version of this is, you know, when the internet was first brought into homes, you know, dial up. Oh, well, if you're using the internet, there's no phone, like you can't get phone service, right? Oh my gosh. Well, like, how do I choose this? Or even the idea that like long distance phone calls were free after 8 PM. I mean, I remember that when I was a kid, is like, that's when you call, you know, your family members or whatever, was like later at night. I mean, I remember that all the time. It was always dark when we talked to my extended family members. And I never realized it was because long distance phone calls were free after 8 o'clock. Like, why do we call these people during the day? But yet there are still many, many homes and many communities. I mean, including where I live, they're literally laying down cable lines to bring, you know, cable speed internet into homes, because there's people around here that still have dial up. And that's just funny to me, you know, because it's, two things can be true, right? Like, there are still people in the world that have to go and gather their water. And then there's some in the rest of the world where it's like, I don't even think about it. Again, the plumber thing, right? Everything's fine. I turn my faucet on, I fill my water. But if I turn the faucet on and nothing comes out, or something weird looking comes out, then it's holy hell. You know, I got to call the plumber. Yeah. Right. And so, you know, I think that's one of the other existential threat things. I talk about this with one of my good friends, who's one of my coworkers, on a pretty regular basis, is like, we as a species need to be very careful, especially in the work world, to not be outsourcing our brains to AI, right? You know, I said before about like, what do humans do next? Well, powerful decision-making and creativity and problem solving. And I think one of the biggest challenges is there are people all around us all the time that are completely outsourcing that too. And having AI making all of their decisions and stuff. And it's like, well, hang on a second here. You know, I mean, like, if your goal is to become a vegetable brain, you're succeeding, you know?
Yeah. You're like, what am I going to do? You're like, well, not that.
Well, right. But like, what happens when, you know, you've put a generative AI tool at the helm of running your business or at the helm of supervising your team? That does not lean into those uniquely human strengths and experiences and stuff. And so, I mean, I think that's one of the other things too, is like, well, we can't give it all over. You know? I mean, it's just, we all joke about it now, but that whole, like, you know, just because it's on Wikipedia or just because it's on Google doesn't mean it's true. Right. But that was kind of the early thoughts. Oh, well, it's on the internet, so it's true.
Yeah.
step off my soapbox now.
No. It's okay. It's okay. I really like exploring this because I think using like our brains, like I really do think that like coming up with solutions to like some of the actual like real problems in the world, like I think more people would love to have more time to do that, right? And to like have some sort of impact in that way. And to take it back to like the water thing, like what I was thinking of was like the reason why I'm coming up with that is because I'm thinking of it like business, right? Like if you think about, let's say I wasn't getting the water myself, but I was paying someone else to do it, right? I would have to be paying that person for their time. But like to me, now I have a pipe that just goes right into my house and I flick the thing that is way less expensive than if I had to pay someone for their time and energy to go collect that water and bring it back. And the point of what I mean by all of this is that like, this is why I can understand like, or this is why I feel like I could see the cost of a lot of things going down is because that is what has happened in the past, right? Like either my own physical time and energy would have to be used to go getting that water, or I would have to pay someone for their time and energy to go do it. Whereas now I just turn the faucet and water comes out. So there's no physical, like literally zero physical energy involved. And my water bill at the end of the month is just so minimal. It's like silly. And so my point is that like, okay, if I can see that happening just with something as simple as bringing water into my house, then it makes sense then that the cost of doing business would go down, which means just inherently the cost of selling whatever you're in business to do would also go down. And so like, I feel like I could see that happening. I could see the cost of so many things going down. And if that happens, this is what I think is really interesting is that if the cost of everything goes down, right, and people don't have to work as much in order to pay their bills or whatever it might be, then this is why I think it's so interesting and why we're being pushed into this spot where people are so upset about AI is because I think it's forcing people to like confront this whole idea of like, well, what I do with my time if I actually had value? Most of my time free? Like, like what do you actually do? What do you think about? What sort of impact are you trying to make? It's like you were saying earlier about like being vulnerable and like, what actually does matter to me? What positive impact would I like to have? Because as much as people say they don't like their jobs, like, and you know, they're like, oh, it's a grind. I hate having to go to work. It's like, that is true. But also like, be honest. You like that you don't have to think about it. You like that you just, hey, I just wake up and I go do this thing. And I'm not saying that's not a judgment of other people. I've had jobs in the past too. I'm saying that from my experience. Like that is part of the trade-off when you have a job. You go, hey, I know I'm going to get a paycheck. I know my schedule's going to
trading
look
my time for somebody else.
Yeah. And it's like, I know what my schedule's going to look like. I know that I could probably float through half the day without really thinking a lot, but as long as I get my job done, they're going to, you know, pay me. Like I have this like set routine of what's going to happen, and you have like just enough free time to be able to do some of the things that you enjoy. And then on the flip side, you just go to work. Right. But like you were saying, like when you talk to a lot of people and you ask them these questions of like, what recharges your battery and like all that stuff and it's like, I never really thought about that. So it's like a lot of us are operating on autopilot, and to be in a position where we actually will have more, let's say even half of the time spent working just free is like, what would you do with that time? You know?
Yeah.
If you've ever thought about writing a book, Peaceful Profits can help you go from idea to published author and even position your book to become a bestseller. Go to howtobeaperson.co and click Peaceful Profits author resource to get more information now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is. And again, I keep using this phrase, but I think it really is accurate. It is this existential threat of, you know, there's the two sides of the same coin of the technology. That technology has always been assistive in some way to us, right? But the other side of it is like, well, what's the cost or what's the trade-off, right? So like, again, we'll come back to like, you know, some examples or something like dishwashers, right? You know, if you have a dishwasher, right? People love having their dishwashers because then I don't have to wash all my, you know, my dishes by hand. Well, what's the trade-off? Well, dishwashers crap out. You have to buy a new one. You have to repair it, you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And then, oh my gosh, right. I have to do all of my dishes by hand. You know, people that are listening that don't have a dishwasher, they're like, this is my life every day. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a trade-off there, you know, of, you know, having, you know, having running water in your home means that you don't have to go and fetch your water and sanitize it and, all this sort of stuff, which means what's the trade-off? You have to pay for that. You have to pay for the infrastructure and, if the pipes go, whatever. But I do think that there is an element of, if I don't do this, then what do I do? And I think that's particularly, again, I'll come back to the generational thing. I think that's particularly threatening, I think, to anybody who's maybe like age 40 and above, maybe age 45 and above, because I think there's this idea that, and I see this in my peers, right? People that are around my same age, there's this idea that like, okay, like maybe when I'm 45, maybe even 40, I'm kind of over that hill of like, I'm now on the downward slide of the rest of my career. And now all of a sudden there's this huge change that is rapidly like a huge multiplying sort of thing, which means now these folks have to confront that the next 15 or 20 years of their work life might look significantly different / harder / more difficult to understand / who knows what. And that uncertainty, right? Like you're supposed to become more certain the farther along in life you get. You're supposed to be more secure the farther along in life you get. You're supposed to, things are supposed to get quote unquote easier, all this sort of stuff. And so I think that there's this like threat of like, well, hang on a second, what does this mean for me? And I do hear, I have a few people in my world, well, I don't need to pay attention to that AI stuff. I'm retiring in, 5 years or 7 years. I'm like, if you think you're going to be able to ride this out in 5 to 7 years and it's not going to affect you, that's bonkers, right?
Yeah.
You can keep your, I feel like the folks that are kind of keeping their head in the sand, that time is just about up. I think the next like 6 to 12 months, if that, but again, to me, there's an opportunist element to this of like, so you might not be doing that thing at your work anymore. Well, what would you do? That is work, right? And it forces us to start having conversations about redefining what work is, right? And I think about anybody who's in a service industry sort of role. My role is I facilitate workshops, right? Could somebody log into any one of the myriad of AI quote unquote coaching services that are out there and like, help me build this skill on blah, 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 100%. So, okay. So the existential threat there for somebody like me is, okay, well, what is the value that I bring to the room? Right. Well, the value I bring to the room is the 20 plus years of experiences and stories and things that I can help people, in real life kind of, match these things, the relationships, the being with people when they're struggling, right? Like AI will be with you when you're struggling, but it's going to be overly positively reinforcing to your struggle 100% of the time, right? But I do think this existential threat, not only of what is work, but as you said before, of how do I begin to understand what would I do with my time? Because what if, and this is the thing I keep thinking about, what if time no longer feels like such a finite resource as it does now? It's not that our clock is going to no longer like be 24 hours, right? Like that's not it. But what if work? And I have friends that are in this. I work for, 3 to 5 hours a day and that's about it, right? Because I'm able to get the things done that I get done because I'm no longer held hostage to this 8-hour workday thing. Okay. So they still experience 24 hours, but they experience a different type of life. Mm-hmm. And so what if we stop looking like, what if this creates a world where some people, not all, but start looking at things saying, there's something in between sleep and work, right? We always talk about the two things that you spend most of your time, your living life is sleeping and working. What if it's no longer those things? What if there's a third thing, whether it's family, whether it's hobby, whether it's fitness, wellness, whatever, that now becomes the number 2 or the number 3, and work is just a thing like anything else.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about because when you consider the example that you gave of like the machine in the airport, it's like the cost to build that and then the cost to continue to have it run is honestly just minimal, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then it's almost as if like like, okay, like if you ask someone, hey, if you could have someone who lived in your house, who would basically take care of your house for you, who would mow the lawn, who would cook you meals, who would do your laundry, who would clean it, everything. And it cost you $10 a day. Would you do it? Like, well, yeah, of course I would do it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, who wouldn't do that? That's insane.
Yeah.
And you're like, but we're like, but what about, of course I want to make sure this person gets paid fairly. And you're like, oh, it's not a person. It's just a robot. And so
Right.
it doesn't, there's no such thing. It's just a machine that just does its job. And you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. Like, just like I said, like with the water where you turn the faucet, you're paying, you know, what, $1 or $2 a day or something on your water bill to do that. It's like, oh, well, that really does change things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It shifts the whole like conversation around like if you go, okay, I need to pay my bills. Like anytime you're paying a bill, like majority of the cost is coming from all of the human work associated with whatever you're purchasing. Right. Because every step of the way, there's a person, right? Like every step you go from like wherever if it's a physical product, physically sourcing the materials, then shipping, then putting them all together, then stocking, and right. There's humans every step of the way, but there are no humans any step of the way. And the cost of everything goes down to this. What even is work? Like, what do you have to do? Like, first of all, where are humans needed in that process? And then even if you are like, hey, here's $1, and you're like, oh no, $1 for like a day of work. And you're like, well, yeah, but everything is 10 cents or everything is a penny. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? Yeah. That's what you understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like, I could see that like that being the progression, you know?
It's interesting to think, and I'm sure there's, economists that have put together like, models like this where like life should get less expensive. Right. But that, has that panned out yet? No, right? No. With everything is more expensive, and so
except for TVs for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly things that have gotten less expensive, but I do think about that of like, well, what would that model look like if things actually did get less expensive? Because the concept of work becomes less as a means to an end, right? And it becomes more about a contribution to community or barter or some other economic model of contribution, right? That is much more, dare I say, socialist, right? Or communal, in a way of like, we're performing services for other people because services need to be performed, not because you're going to pay me to do this thing because that's the transaction, right?
Yeah.
But that's such a wholly different, I mean, it's almost it's like, a hippie commune sort of thing of like, well, this person, these people take care of the farm and these people do this thing. And, everybody takes care of a little bit of everything and nobody really, pays for things, right? Because everybody's doing something for somebody else. There's something very cool about that, but there's also something that is, I mean, that's incredibly threatening to people because it's like, well, no, the way that our model, capitalist model works is, make a shit ton of money on the backs of other people and, making products, making more money by somehow making things cost less, which makes no sense, but it does. I mean, the threat is real. I think what people get caught up in is only talking about the threat as a threat instead of an opportunity. And at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about, that you and your wife had a business that absolutely thrived during COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so what was a literal threat in many, many regards to, billions of people was an opportunity for you, was an opportunity for other people. And I think about that still to this day of, I mean, the example I share with people is, raise a hands. How many people have done a curbside carryout at fill in the blank, restaurants, business, whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's something that 100% came about in COVID, and businesses realized that there's a whole bunch of people that would rather pull up to the curb and have you walk their bag of stuff out than get out of the car, especially those of us that have little kids, right? Car seats and kids in and out of the car seat. Like, bring it to my door. I'm glad to pay for that, right? So, I mean, there's goods and there's bads. I think it's unfortunate when people are only talking about it from a threat sense. Because I think what that does is it just closes people off from thinking about what the opportunity might look like, right? And again, that's where human innovation and creativity and all that stuff comes from.
Yeah, it's just like you were saying before, that I feel like no matter what event happens, no matter what occurs, there's going to be negative effects, but there's also going to be positive opportunities. And so, like, I agree with you, right? Like, a lot of the discourse around it is like, oh no, what's going to happen? And you're like, we got to look at the other side of this too, because to be honest, like, you're not going to stop it, right? Like, you're sitting here worried about what's going to happen. And it's like, okay, but none of that is going to stop it from happening in the first place, right? So we have to think about, like, what are the potential positives, opportunities that would come out of this. Yeah. And I think for me, I would say for probably 10 plus years, I got into this, like, just really into like personal development and like reading books and just kind of exploring like my values and what's important to me and the nature of reality and questioning things and all of that. And that has been, I mean, honestly, it's just it's like, to me, like the most fulfilling part of being alive is like just doing that. Right. And I think a lot of people miss out on it because they're so busy living the life that was handed to them to live, you know? Right. And for me, that was what it was before I did that, was just because I was so busy doing what I thought I was supposed to do, what, you know, the religion I was raised in told me how I was supposed to spend my time, and what my job told me, hey, you got to be here this many days and blah, blah, blah. And so you just don't, it's like, you're not thinking about the nature of reality. You're not thinking about, you know, these like bigger concepts, because you're just like, I'm just trying to pay my bills, right? I'm just going to work and doing what I need to do and got to get it done, right? And like, that's what's happening. But like, to me, I'm excited for the potential for more people to have that opportunity to just sit and be like, okay, what actually is important to me and what matters, and explore themselves and explore, you know, the world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the exploration of self thing, I mean, I wish for every person, you know, self included, you included, everyone, is that like, we don't just have to be in this survival sort of place, right? That like at some point that everybody gets moments and spaces where we feel like we're thriving and we're doing well, and we have more and more and more of those, right? Like, I mean, I think that's the hope through all of this. But I think the other part of it too is there's like a collective piece to all of that, of like, this can't just be the experience for one person, right? You know, and I think that's one of the big challenges that people have with the AI piece, is like, well, you know, look at these companies and they're just making bajillions of dollars and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, like that is not great, right? And like, what happens when these companies go public, and oh my gosh, it's going to be crazy. And it's, you know, going to be the same group of people that are going to be making, you know, bajillions of dollars. And I think there just has to be a collective, you know, the phrase that I always think about is, you know, like, you know, high tides lift all boats, right? Is like, there has to be an element like at some point where it's not just a small group of people that are benefiting from this, while like the rest of people are marginally benefiting from this, right? You know, it just, I think that's the unknown with AI, right? Is this actually going to be something? It feels so accessible to everybody right now, and becoming, I think, more accessible. But you can also tell like it's becoming slightly less accessible as people are getting a little bit more of a peek under the hood of like, how much does this actually cost, right? And like, what is this looking like for the communities where data centers are, and like their energy bills and all this sort of like crazy stuff, these stories that you're hearing, you know? So is there an element of like collective good that's coming from this? Are we actually up leveling as humans, right? Like, what does this look like in the United States versus other countries? Like, is this actually a good thing? You know? Because I think some of this is like entirely US centric kind of US nonsense, you know, of this like, you know, this idea of like what we believe to be true and how things should be. Right. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, all we can do is just buckle up and wait and see what happens,
so
right?
just hang out. We'll have the same conversation like a year from now.
Yeah, exactly. Mickey, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show. So for anybody that's listening that wants to connect with you or the company that you work with, how can they do so?
Yeah, the best way is connect with me on LinkedIn. Mickey Fitch-Collins, pretty easy to find out there. And connect with me on LinkedIn, send a message. I would be happy to chat with folks a little bit more of kind of some of the things I was talking about, the work that I do at Learnit. I'd be happy to give folks a code to have kind of a comp seat and check out one of the workshops. I also host a podcast about learning and development too called the Learnit Lounge. So if folks want to check that out, just connect with me.
Amazing. I love it. Mickey, like I said, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who'd appreciate it. For everything I have to offer, visit howtobeaperson.co.